Good afternoon and welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. With me, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Jim, the Thrill Stamm. How you doing, brother?
Oh, man, Gary, I like that. Yeah, man, I'm good. And not to put too much pressure on our guests today, but we've got an all-star crew today.
It is a big beastly show. It is. We're stacked today. Because returning to the show this week, we have our buddy James Littleton live from West by God, Virginia, and he's proud as hell he's wearing their jacket today.
Oh, yeah.
James, good to have you back, man. It was great to see you at the live show.
Thanks for having me, Gary. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been, brother. And finally, I'd like to welcome my friend Ethan Smith. He is the host of Locked On Pirates, and many of you know him from listening to my, mostly weekly hits on Mondays with him. And Ethan, glad to have you on today, brother. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Can't complain. Yeah, it's nice to be on the other side of the coin this time. I'm the guest this time, so it's a little different.
Yeah, and it's something we talk about like just about every Monday. He calls me up, and we're like, what are we talking about today?
Honestly,
it's been tough. Today is not one of those days. The news is flying.
No, it isn't.
I mean, boys, I know I sent you out topics this week, and maybe we'll get to them. We'll see how this flows, but maybe we won't. Every once in a while, a news story breaks, and I feel like it touches so many topics, it just can't be ignored. I mean, I'm talking about Juan Soto saying he was offered 13 years, $350 million by the Nationals before the lockout, and he said no. Which, man, not most people in this country could fathom saying no to that, huh? For those of you keeping score, that's about $27 million per until he's 36 years old. He'll be a free agent in 2025. He says he still thinks of Washington as a place where he would like to spend the rest of his career. So we'll see. And then a sentence later says, but right now my agents and I think the best option is to go year by year and wait for free agency. My agent, Scott Boras, someone do the Darth Vader music in the background, has control over the situation. Boy, does he ever. This story's got everything. And I think the best way to start here is first take from this story, and I don't care what direction you want to take it. Jim, co-host duties, you get to go first while the guests get to think for a second.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll just say this. I think it's smart on Juan Soto's part to say, nope, not even close. I'm not doing it. I'll play the short game here, which for him is not that far away. And I think he knows the money's going to be there, and I think he knows more money's going to be there. And, I'll take it from the player's perspective. I think it's really smart on his part. He has really very little incentive in my mind at this point to take the money other than, okay, great. He's got some assurances that he'll never, he should never be poor. But, dude, the dude's going to get paid, and he'd be short selling himself at this point. So, I mean, from a player's standpoint, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that side of the coin too. So, James, I'll go to you. I mean, I know that Boras is one of your trigger words, so I figured I'd let you have a visceral reaction.
I mean, Boras likes to set records, and 350 does, or 13 years, whatever, 350 doesn't set records. That's what he's about. That's what he was about with A-Rod in Texas. That's just what he does. Right. I think Washington came in about $100 million under what they needed to maybe get a deal done. That's just not a realistic
Yeah.
number offering him that 27 a year. On Soto's side, I mean, he's turning away guaranteed money. 3 years from now, he could have 2 bad knees. Who knows what else wrong with him, and that money's gone. I mean, he's betting on himself. I mean, I like that, but
those are common themes that you and Jim share. I think something that most reasonable people can see is the player side of this thing. You know, like why wouldn't he bet on himself, right? But Ethan, you know, you're a different generation than everybody else on this call. You know, you're a little younger. You're probably a little bit more used to this being 100% part of your sports environment.
Mm-hmm.
What are your takes on this, man?
So the first thing initially that I thought of whenever, of course, he's a Washington National, is I thought about his former teammate, Max Scherzer. And you mentioned the money already that he's getting yearly. Scherzer just made more than that on the deal with the Mets, and Scherzer's in his late 30s. So why, again, would Soto, who, as you've already mentioned, is going to be 26 when he's a free agent, if he just replicates what he did this year with what he did, the next two out of the next 3 years.
Numbers, by the way. Stupid numbers.
Yeah, so he doesn't even have to replicate that. He could be like 70% of that over the next 2 out of the next 3 years, and it still should garner, I'd say, like he said, like $450 million. And I mean, Tatis got that kind of money too. So, I mean, I don't mind the player betting on himself, but of course there is the caveat that what happens if he does get hurt. But I also don't think with him being 26 years old that an injury is going to be the biggest problem in him getting ultimately what he wants payment-wise. But I might be young, but Boris, again, is a trigger word for a lot of people across generations. Trust me. It's a trigger word for a lot of people.
Well, I mean...
Let me just say this too, though. I mean, you are rolling the dice from a health perspective, but unless he has, you know, a Teddy Bridgewater type catastrophic knee injury type deal, which is what he suffered in the NFL, and your situation is going to be that poor or unknown, or you wake up tomorrow with the worst back problems a 23-year-old could ever have. I think you're going to see like guys like Acuna. He's going to be back. He's going to be fine. I don't think it's going to cost. I mean, I don't think it'll cost him anything. Now, even if he suffered an injury like that, he'd probably still come out no worse. So I just think that, like, what's the incentive? So I just wanted to put that out there, that in baseball, you know, we're not talking about some of the horrific injuries you might see in say the NFL or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I should give my initial take on this too.
Oh yeah, Gary, how about you?
My first thought on this one was really that kind of money is insane to turn down at that age. I'm glad that he did, because I think, you know, and it's, you know, others are reporting that he's got a good shot to be the first player to ever get a $500 million contract. And I know people will say Patrick Mahomes, but we're talking about like guaranteed $500 million contract. That's never happened. I think he could probably do it. He's the right age. He started early enough. You know, being 26, good shot. He's going to clear that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. If he can stay healthy for a couple more seasons and not have Washington kill him, he really could do it. I don't begrudge him that. I don't begrudge him easily.
I ran some quick numbers today, and I mean, just with 3 years of ARB, and if they did 10 years of $40 million a year after that, that's at 467 approximate. So I mean, he's really close to 500. He's easily going to get that, I think, on the open market. There's always that one stupid team.
Yeah, I completely agree. The thing is, I don't begrudge him that.
No.
But it brings up more questions for me than just, do I like it? Do I not? Do I support the player? Do I think that the team should have to pay that much? To me, it's more about, I already know he's going to go to free agency. Boris is going to make that happen. And if he doesn't, then Washington will overpay. Like, if it could be 500, it'll be 510. He'll get his money. He'll get this contract done. But when we have that conversation about where he goes, there will be 3-4 teams we talk about. Period. When something like this happens in the NFL, there's a major free agent out there. Almost every team could do anything to make that happen. We talk scoffingly about the Steelers getting Aaron Rodgers, right? We do. I mean, we know that's not going to happen, but you know it could.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference when you're a baseball fan in most markets. Let's talk, after we come back from the break, a little bit more about the fingers that this story has into everything else that's going on in baseball right now. All right, and welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. And the next thing we want to continue on is the Juan Soto situation a little bit. And I wanted to talk about the salary we expected him to get. I do expect it to be up in the 500 range. You know, you have out there right now Mookie Betts $365 for 12 years. Mike Trout is $360 over 10 years. So I think, what did you say Tatis was, Jim?
14 and 340, which that just recently happened too. So,
right. So, it's clear Juan Soto is going to get more than that. He deserves it. Get what you can, right? The problem with the league, though, is much like the other leagues where somebody goes on the market, most teams can make a pitch for him. In MLB, that's not the case. And we're talking teams that really spend money, too, like would not be able to flirt with that. Like the Rangers spent a bunch of money. They couldn't spend that money. No. That's reserved for a few teams. There's the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, and Cubs, maybe.
Do the Red Sox even spend that kind of money?
They can and have, but I don't know they would.
Yeah, you got like that second tier that one of them could get frisky and try to go for that. But yeah, I think you are down to probably those 3 or 4.
Yeah, and that's the way baseball is structured right now. And I mean, you can take this conversation anywhere you want. You can say that simple fact is part of the problem with this league. I can say that I think a salary cap would fix that. But I can also sit here and tell you honestly, a salary cap would probably eliminate the possibility of somebody getting a $500 million contract. I just, it's disingenuous for me to sit here and say that a salary cap would exist and somebody be getting that kind of money. So how do I justify openly wanting a cap knowing what I'm asking of a player like Juan Soto that deserves every red cent somebody would offer him? And Ethan, I'll start with you on that.
I mean, exactly. I mean, it would create better diversity in the league in terms of how many teams you would have contending, how many teams would not tank anymore. You would, again, we'll get into it later about the playoff stuff that started today as well, about how more teams would have a better shot at the playoffs. And that would just create a more rounded league. But at the end of the day, when you have a player like a Juan Soto, or even if he wasn't signed yet, a Wander Franco, or the next great prospect or great player like that, the salary cap just wouldn't allow you to pay this guy what he ultimately deserves, which then creates an inherent problem of players feeling like they're not getting paid enough, which is the reason we're in a lockout already, is because the players don't feel like they're getting paid enough. So at the end of the day, it's just two sides of the coin, and realistically, you just might have to pick one.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, it's something that I know you struggle with too. We both talk about a cap.
I do.
We both think like basically we've diagnosed the disease. We think we've found a cure, but we don't necessarily want to kill what we have to kill to do that. So how do you justify this? Like, how do you even have this conversation with yourself?
I mean, I think what I ultimately end up saying is that, and it sounds cliche, but I really don't think it is you talk about just the health of the game. And to me, that's ultimately all we have to like judge it on. When all is said and done, and you're looking at the product, and you're looking at what has come of the current CBA that's been in place, or what they've done in baseball for so long, and then you start to compare it to other things and other leagues and how they distribute money and whatnot. To me, it just comes down to, are we seeing the best overall product that we possibly can? And I don't treat it like it's a regular business because of those, because of all these factors. So to me, it comes down to, is the game healthy? And right now, this is not a healthy game. And so both sides have to realize that if you don't keep the integrity of the game, the competition where it needs to be, and you're just in it for the bottom dollar, which I know that's essentially what ends up happening a lot of times.
On both sides, too.
On both sides, yeah. Like, look, I mean, players want paid, they should, and owners, they have a right to do what they want to do. But I just look at it like, look around at this game right now. It's ugly.
James, I think for me, I justify it because, that's incredible he can get that kind of salary. But for what this system is doing to the game, I think it's a dying thing. I don't see these salaries continuing to skyrocket forever and ever and ever. I feel like they're going to start to come back to the mean a little bit, especially after we start seeing some of these 10 and 14-year contract arcs play out. When we start really seeing the returns that people are getting when they're eventually trying to move Fernando Tatis with 7 years left at $30 million a year.
Well, I mean,
what do you think of this?
I think some of the teams have learned about giving those big contracts out. I mean, you look at the Miguel Cabrera contract. I mean, that's killing Detroit. The Pujols contract with the Angels, I mean, he wasn't worth that the last few years. I don't think they ever really got value for him. So I think
devil's advocate on Detroit. They paid him a lot of money, but he was nothing more than a goodwill ambassador when they tore everything else around him down to do what they're doing right now, which is building back up.
Yeah, but I
did he hurt them really?
They regret that, I'm sure, the last couple of years. They could have taken that money and spent it elsewhere and maybe been competitive. But I don't know what their payroll was this past year, but probably 30% of their payroll tied up into one player, approximately, I'm guessing. I mean,
I hear what you're saying, man. I was just playing devil's advocate. Continue.
I mean, as a fan, I hate teams giving these long guaranteed contracts. I mean, you see the big numbers in the NFL, but they can get out from underneath them if they need to at a certain point. But there's just no getting out from underneath an albatross contract in in Major League Baseball. You've got that for years. And
there's a big part of me that wonders
you brought
if that's
Strasburg a little bit ago. He's another one. He's always going to be hurt.
But they just re-upped him knowing that.
That's,
you know what I mean? Like, they just moved heaven and earth to keep him.
Can you remind me who his agent is? Who was his agent when that happened?
Oh, I have no idea. I really don't. The point is they moved heaven and earth to keep him.
And they overpaid because they knew they had to because of the agent.
Right.
I mean, that's
probably on the expectation that it would lead to them being able to keep Soto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it might not play out that way, huh?
Doesn't sound like it.
Ethan, how many times do people keep going back to the well and making deals with the devil?
Too many. But also to kind of bring this into the Pirates fold of what you were just talking about as well, say O'Neal Cruz pops on the scene for 1 or 2 years, maybe even 3 years, right? Say he's putting up half of what Juan Soto is putting up and then maybe has like a ridiculous year. Just saying O'Neal Cruz, not saying like anybody. Would Pirates fans justify giving O'Neal Cruz a 10-year contract?
I would love to see it happen. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I don't think that this market would ever do that.
No.
And even if I can legitimately tell you they should, I don't think they would do something like that without a salary floor. If I'm honest with you, I think
100%.
that's when they would do something like that. When they know that X amount of dollars have to go out the door no matter what anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I think they'd bother doing something like that.
And I mean, I've told you before, I think Brian Reynolds would have already been signed to an extension if there was a salary floor.
Sure. I mean, Jim, if we kind of agree that the game needs to change, and we kind of agree that we don't want the players to lose money, we kind of agree that the owners aren't spending all the money that they could be spending. I mean, I'm out of answers really on what to expect anymore.
Well, and I think too, like, here's something that has been bothering me as this has been going on, is that it feels to me like the owners are really just trying to break the players union right now, almost. Like they're set on reestablishing a firm line here. They're not going to renegotiate. They feel like this is the chance for them to send that message.
Now, isn't that interesting though? Because you and I we were just talking to Greg Olson a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. What was the one thing he said to us about this whole situation? He said that the players had pitifully lost the last two negotiations. And here you are basically saying that the owners are reestablishing their dominance that the players, including former players, already feel they've had for the last two.
I know. I think when it is interesting. We have talked to some former players, and if you hear, I follow some on Twitter and social media in general, and they really do feel that they have been held over a barrel for a long time, and that they have already given so much. And to me, quite honestly, I don't know if that's legitimate or if that's just what they're being fed from their representatives. I don't know. It gets so confusing, and that's where I get held up on, because I do think the owners, everything they're saying is they want to get this thing addressed, but here we are with 5-6 meetings in 74 days of a lockout that they've imposed. Anytime that anything is offered, they ask to cut jobs. So it's just frustrating, because I don't think we're dealing with them being all that honest on their side, and that makes me frustrated, because I think they're their own worst enemy at times.
Especially since I know you came into this whole thing thinking that they had nailed on reason to want to play. And, I remember that was some of the things we disagreed on with this whole thing, is I felt like they didn't. Like, now was the time to push back and not give in here. But it seems like they don't care about the money, really. And it seems to me like they're angling towards trying to miss games. Ethan, where are you at on that?
I mean, again, like I have said before on my podcast, I don't think we're getting baseball until Labor Day. I don't think they really care about losing games. I think they're fine with it. I don't think, and as you already mentioned, I don't think they care about losing the money either. Everybody wants to bring up the lost money from the COVID year, but I mean, at the end of the day, these guys have other parts of influxes of money that they get, and they're going to want to keep the game the way they want to keep it. And are we going to ever get to that median where the players and the owners are both happy? No. I just think there's going to end up being a time where the players get fed up. They're going to want to play baseball, and the owners are going to stick right where they want to stay, and they'll maybe compromise a little bit. And at the end of the day, the players will end up almost in the same spot that they were in when this whole thing began in the first place.
I mean, very well said. And James, one thing I wanted to ask you about in particular to kind of close this topic out before we move into our next segment. You often say that you see the players kind of just wanting a win this time. What do you mean by that? What does that really look like to you?
I mean, I think they want to come out of this and say, we got what we wanted here. We got it. Now, I mean, they keep saying that they want more money, but if they wanted more money, they would just demand a salary cap. I mean, that would instantly give them more money. Instantly. I don't think that's it. I think they just want to be able to come out and say they won the negotiation. Because if they come out with a cap, even with more money, that's still a loss in a lot of people's eyes. If the players come out with a cap, they've lost. Even it doesn't matter how much, 7% more money, because I think they come in right around 43% of revenue. So if they got a cap at 50%, yeah, they get 7% more money, but I mean, they've lost because they had to settle for a cap. They want to come out of this saying, we got what we wanted from the owners. Even if it's something little, like an extra year of arbitration, or what do they say? They wanted 80% today.
And it's important that it's one of the owner's sacred cows, too, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be anything. It has to be one of the owner's sacred cows.
It has to be one of the things that the owners have said they're not going to budge on.
Right.
And
so, I mean, it's starting to feel like an impasse, though, right now. I just don't see any kind of movement on anything material. And that should make you feel pretty afraid for the future, the immediate future of the game. I do think that we are going into a little bit of an extended lockout here. And I don't think we're going to come out of it with the right kind of changes to the game. So
not certainly what we want in Pittsburgh, that's for sure. I mean, they're so
the other revelation that came out like not very long ago here was, I think it was I want to say Evan Drulick from ESPN reported that the players get to see an audited version of the income for the teams. So they have a kind of modified open books. That's something I never knew before, and that kind of changes a few things for me because the players do kind of understand that revenue stream a little bit better than I was under the impression they were.
I didn't know that. I did not know that was to them in their scope of things that they could see. Now, my question would be, man, you can cook books and make numbers look pretty good.
They're independently audited before they go to the players, so it seemed pretty straight up. The only thing that they weren't including into that information was some of the money they make from outside interests, like parking or things like that. But the game itself, what's made from the team and everything, that changes some things for me. That's something I didn't know the players had that kind of vision into. So it makes me feel like maybe I should take their asks a little more seriously. Maybe they actually know what they're asking for a little bit more than I've given them credit for in the past because of that little nugget. And to be fair, Jim, it came out in the last couple of weeks when you've been kind of preoccupied. So
yeah, and you're right. The first thing, because it is new to me, when you said that, immediately I thought, does that legitimize their argument a little bit on some of the things that they're asking for? It's the first thing, because they're getting that kind of look. It makes you question it, right?
Yeah. So when they're saying no, it's absolute crap that you're not paying this, maybe it's a little more absolute crap than I've always assumed. I've always assumed they were asking for the sun, moon, and stars and really only wanted the moon. Now maybe I feel like they want the moon and the stars, and they should be able to get that.
Yeah, and it is fair to ask, and this may make James's hair catch on fire, and that would be amazing if you are watching this right now. But are the owners even being sincere when they talk about some of the things they're talking about, and are they just cloaking it under things like, competition and things of that nature, where at the end of the day, they really just want to save the money and put more money in their pockets. Are they really concerned about some of these things that they say they are? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Ethan, did that change anything for you when you got that little nugget of information?
I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, because at the end of the day, like everybody thought until you just told me that, until like found out about it, I thought the players were just blindly saying, "Oh yeah, you need to pay more and do this and that." But now, if that's true, that's not blind. That is me being able to look at a piece of paper and see what you're spending on paper. And I mean, as you said, like, okay,
within
cool.
reason. Again,
yeah, within
it's
reason,
not 100% open, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like, too, who cares about parking expenses? I mean, they might make a lot of money off of it, but that's not going to be paying your players $500 million.
Pirates don't, that's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, well,
I guarantee Bob gave him that page.
Oh, yeah, he was probably like, yeah, here you go. He's like, let me throw that one in there real quick. But I mean,
Bob was like, we ain't made nothing. Yeah, and he said it proud, too. He had that page. It was just like nothing.
Yeah, literally, yeah. It was just one page, and it said parking expenses and profit, and it was just in big 128 Times New Roman's font. Nothing.
No, he put in it how much they've been charging the players to park at PNC.
Yep, there you go. There you go.
So, James, what does that change for you, brother? I mean, like, that's something that we haven't known in the past. That was the first time I've ever seen that reported.
It surprises me in one thing that there are certain outspoken players that are on the negotiating team, and I'm really surprised that they haven't pushed some of those numbers in the media more. Because I mean, Cole is pretty outspoken. Andrew Miller gave an interview which left me with more questions than it did answers. But I mean, I thought these guys were like, "Look, we know you're making this much money. I mean, we know this. So why?" I mean, I just don't understand why they continue to keep it hush hush about how much money they know that the owners are getting.
It's weird because you're right that if it's leverage they have, they're not using it very well.
I mean, if I was the players, I'd be like, I would just draw up a spreadsheet. We know this is how much each team brings in approximately. What's the problem?
Well, no matter how you look at it, it's weird, and it changes some of my thought processes a little bit. And
it should at least give you pause, right?
It should. It should at least make you consider that maybe you need to modify your thinking just a little bit. But I think we should probably wrap up the show talking about something that they actually do agree on, oddly enough. And that would be the new playoff structure because, man, that's... It's weird. I don't know. Let's take another quick break. All right, we're back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network with Ethan, who just dropped something and probably broke his computer.
He's throwing stuff already, man.
Still throwing stuff because of the whole labor dispute, and you got James. He's in West Virginia, so he's angry too because of that mostly, and you got Jim. Stuck in an ice storm on location. So, hey, I figured the last thing we should talk about here a little bit is what these teams actually agree on because, we just spent, the majority of the show ripping apart everything they can't come together on. And the MLB playoff format is apparently set. And 7 playoff teams per league. Teams with the best record get a bye and go to the division series. Top remaining division winner gets to pick their opponent from the 4 wildcard teams and plays the best of 3 all games at home. And the 3rd division winner does the same. So I guess let's do thoughts. James, what do you think, brother? Because it's definitely different.
I like it.
On the surface, I'm happy to get rid of the 1 card wild card.
Yeah, I like it. from first glance. I need more specifics, but I like that teams get to pick their opponents. I think that creates some intrigue and strategy. I think it gives
Do you think it's going to be like WWE?
I
Oh,
hope
dude, thank you, Gary. Thank you. That's exactly what I thought when I heard it.
I hope they make it into a TV show where the general manager, whoever's going to pick, goes out and has to like do something like
Ooh,
stab.
brother, I'm taking down the Twins this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, Ethan, does this do anything for you? Are you excited for the TV show? That's what this is all about, right?
So here, when I saw this, the first thing I thought of was, now that you use the WWE reference, and thank you for leading into this because I was going to say this beforehand. Do you guys? I can't think of his name all of a sudden now, but the old SmackDown general manager Sal. Wait a minute, playa. Like I'm waiting for them. I'm waiting for him to come out and have a team. Like a team picks the team they want to play, and he just comes out and he's like, "Nah, you're actually going to be playing the Reds or like some random team." Now this is going to be great, James. This is going to be great until the Pirates have the or one of those spots, and then they pick a team to play and lose the first 2 games in PNC Park. This will be great until that happens. But I mean, I like the intrigue behind it because you can go back and look on how you did against those certain teams on the year. You can look at the matchups that you're going to be facing ahead of time. And I also I think the most with that incentive, I like that all the games would be at home. There's none of that needless, play 2 games, travel, play 2 more games, travel again. It's just, you're going right here. It's a normal 3-game series like how it normally would be. All the games are in the same place. And the home team obviously gets the clear advantage as a division winner.
I mean, I kind of don't hate that either, but Jim, this is not the baseball we grew up with. We remember when only the division winners went to the playoffs,
Yeah.
What do you think of this?
I don't want to. I'm so glad James was on the other side of it because I really expected him to be, like me being a crusty old dude about it. I don't like it. I think it's way too many teams in the postseason in baseball. You're talking 14 of 30 will now be making the postseason for a 162 game season. I think what it's doing for me, I just think it's fool's gold for a lot of baseball and throwing them a bone, knowing that we're never going to get to the point where there's a true even level, playing field. And so this is what they're going to give people. And I just don't see it as being very legitimate. So, does it make fans happier? Probably. But I just don't see it as being anything that really changes things for wanting to see a championship in places like Pittsburgh. Yeah, okay, great. We made the playoffs one year and then get slaughtered by the Dodgers. Is that better? I mean, maybe marginally, but it's not going to change what we ultimately want here in Pittsburgh, is it?
I can't see how it would. I think we need to. I think we need to maybe that's something we need to talk a little more broadly about. Is what is this really going to do to the league? I mean, is this going to change anything? Does this change tanking? Does this change the types of teams that are in it? Does this change how teams approach this altogether? For me, my first thought is, boy, I think they created an awful lot of incentive to hover around 500.
Mm-hmm.
Get your ticket to the dance, and you can probably be relatively competitive most of the time, if that's your goal. So a team like the Pirates, I think they could maintain that, at 500, like spending say 80 to 100 million.
Yeah.
I think they could do that pretty easily.
Well, and to touch on your point too, if this was the playoff format heading into this year, the Philadelphia Phillies would have been a playoff team. Yeah. 82 and 80, they would have been a playoff team. The Reds would have been a playoff team. And then you look at the American League, which I think this would have been fun for the American League this year. You would have had Tampa Bay, Houston, the White Sox, Boston, the Yankees, Toronto, and Seattle as the 7 teams in the American League. That
it would have been a fun playoff, and all those teams were relatively high up there in the first place in the American League. So that would have been a pretty interesting.
The AL East minus Baltimore versus everybody else.
Pretty much.
See, the thing is, if I'm just honest and simplify this as much as possible, I'm going to dig the hell out of the extra playoff games. I'm going to enjoy watching it as a spectator.
Well, yeah, and I think go ahead, Gary. I'll let you finish.
I think it changes the fabric of the league a little. I think the trade deadline gets weird. I think there's going to be less teams that definitely want to move players and less teams that definitely want to get players. So I think it completely changes the dynamic of that entire period of time. Now, moving players is going to be left to teams that literally just know they've got a guy that they have to get something for, and they're going to move him regardless of what it does to them in this 500 area contention thing.
Mm-hmm.
And let's put it right back to the Pirates. Okay, so let's put them in this situation. All right, let's say they're hovering around 500. What does it really change for them that year that you're in with them being at that point? You know, I don't think it changes a lot. I don't think it makes them go out and make big moves. I think if anything, it allows them to sit and stand pat. There's no real reason to make any big moves. You can still hope to get in, and ownership like the Pirates, let's face it, doesn't that line up with how they're going to want to operate anyway? So I think it encourages teams to even be more conservative when they get to those points. I don't know that it changes what certain teams are going to want to do anyway, whether you're talking bottom half of the league or top half of the league. I think their approach stays the same.
I mean, I think if you're floating right down the middle and you're okay with that and you know you're never going to spend like the top guys can spend, then I think you're right. It probably doesn't change anything for you. If anything, you're comfortable just riding. But if you're a team that will spend at times like to get to a peak, like Detroit, for instance, like they will spend when they have to. They'll go up to 200 if they have to. But it might give them incentive to do that at a different time.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there'll be a few teams that really could use it to their advantage.
You know who I think this benefits a lot? The Chicago Cubs. Right now with the moves they made before the lockout and then saying, oh, cool, we have a incentive to spend money to make the playoffs in Chicago. And they have that money available after all those moves. That's a team that incentivizes, but I see your point as well where you're saying,
yeah.
So like teams like Pittsburgh, teams like Cleveland, Kansas City are going to probably remain more like conservative, but those teams that are going to spend more and want to spend more don't have that incentive now, but now do have that incentive, especially as you mentioned already at the trade deadline with those teams that are going to say, okay, we're 40 games under 500. There's no way in hell we make the playoffs.
Yeah. So like James, you're sitting there in playoff contention at the All-Star, at the trade deadline, and your team is like 43 and 47. That's playoff contention. Right?
What's my payroll?
What payroll? I don't know, say you're a team that spends about $20 million more than you are right now at the time.
Okay.
Do you go and make that move, or do you just kind of sit there because you're kind of in contention right now, or you're not a seller at that point? I can't say you're a hard and fast buyer.
What was the Braves' record?
How does this affect the trade deadline? Oh, they were like 8 games under.
Yeah, so it shows it can be done. So if I have $20 million to spend and I can get a couple good pieces, I'll make a push because I've seen it happen. I've seen teams.
But does the playoff structure make that more or less likely?
Weren't the Nationals like under or at the All-Star break? They were dragging the year they won the championship. It's been done. So why not us?
Right. It has been done. Does the new playoff structure change that at all? Because I think
let's say
there's let's say there's two teams that are surefire sellers, as opposed to
Pirates
last
and
year
Baltimore.
there were about 4 or 5
Yes.
that were surefire sellers, right?
I think that they get better returns for their players because there's more teams that I think will be competitive.
And less teams that actually can buy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Schultz Ford's going to have less sales next month because he's got less cars, not because there's less people that want them.
But if there's less cars on the market, those cars' prices go up. I mean, so
yeah,
let's say in 2 years, the Pirates got Reynolds sitting there, non-extended, and there's all these teams in the playoff hunt. His price goes up in my eyes.
Yeah, what if they're in the playoff hunt again?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about. Well, Ethan, that's a good one for you. What would you do then? You know, you're in the playoff hunt now, technically, but you're under 500. You know your team's not good, but you also know the playoffs. That carrot's hanging right there.
Yeah,
that number 7 spot looks juicy.
Yeah,
not if you trade Reynolds.
Yeah, if you trade Reynolds, then you're just punting it. But it's also if you keep him, you're giving yourself the idea that it can happen. And then and that also, moving past the trade deadline, how does this affect the moves that you make in the offseason, saying if you were the 8th seed? So you were 1 spot off of the playoffs, and you go into the offseason, and you're like, well, if we make move A, move B, and move C, we can move up 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 spots.
I mean, it's definitely makes things interesting. I will say that it creates a lot of conversation. Like even right now, we're making up fake scenarios for what could happen. Well, that's going to be interesting fodder every year, I think. So if you're looking for like just interest, that's probably not a bad thing from the league.
No.
Now, as far as like calling other teams out, to me that's a little weird. I don't know that I want to see that.
I love it.
Yeah,
I'd rather
let's touch on that just one more minute here, because to me it just seems hokey. You know, like it just sounds so gimmicky, and you know, I take baseball seriously, and maybe too seriously if you ask anybody that knows me all that well. But I just feel like it's done to generate this like hot takey. This is how we want to try to package and market the game to younger people. Maybe Ethan, maybe you can speak to that, because I mean, how does that sound to you or to people your age that do follow it? Because, you know, to me it sounds gimmicky.
I mean, it's definitely gimmicky, but I also think it definitely speaks to social media interaction as well. I mean, can you imagine, say the Yankees get the number 1 seed and then they go out there and they're like, hey, Tampa Bay, come here. Like, that's literally what it sounds like, is it's like, hey, come here. And what does that tell Tampa Bay fans? It's like, okay, well, 1, we have the chip on our shoulder already because they willingly chose to play us. And 2, the Yankees fans are going to be like, oh, well, we're going to beat the crap out of you because that's why we chose you in the first place. So,
and you know, Manfred would be sitting in a wet spot if the Yankees ever called out Boston. Right?
Yeah, you know, like, exactly. Could you imagine what Twitter would be like that night if, like, the Los Angeles Dodgers call out the Padres or, like, the Giants? Just call them out, like, literally no hesitation. They just say, hey, yeah, we want to play San Diego.
I mean, it's interesting. Go ahead, James.
It's definitely hokey, but I mean, is it as hokey as the NFL bringing out the Rock I mean, it's every sport does it.
But he's not. The Rock's not going to play in the game, though. So,
that's what I would love to see even more. That's what I would love to see even more, as well as like the Dodgers bring out Joe Kelly back when he was on the Dodgers, and like, oh yeah, we want to play you, and Joe Kelly is the guy doing it, or like a just naturally hated player. Like, could you imagine if this was a thing in hockey and the Bruins had the choice to choose, and Brad Marchand chooses to play you? Like, that'd be great. It'd be phenomenal.
Just like the Red Sox had Pedro come and call out the Yankees, or
like imagine that. Like,
now, is there any way we escape Mad Dog being involved in this?
No.
Is there any way we escape that?
No,
because I just picture him screaming into the microphone like a wrestling promoter while this is going on, and I don't think I can deal.
That's where, in my mind, it heads to immediately. Is it's the Dodgers going to announce their their opponent, and all of a sudden you hear, by God, that's Bob Nutting's music, and here he comes running out off the side. It's like, if we get to that point, okay, well then I just surrender.
Do you think that maybe they'll start doing them like gender reveals? We'll have like exploding cakes like in a parking lot.
Well, and like to speak on another sport that we haven't touched on yet, the NBA, you've seen they've done really well with televising the All-Star Game draft because they do a draft now. So they just have two guys sit there and pick the teams, and that's been really, really well put together. And I think they could do something like that where you just have a representative of the three teams and get to choose the teams that they play, and then you just have fun with it from there. Like you could just make fun of it. Like you could do whatever you want to do. Maybe a team comes out with a Plinko board with the teams on there, and they just drop the Plinko board and let the Plinko decide where they go.
So you're basically saying like you're completely cool with this just being a fun thing. You don't care about
it's a fun thing. Like I said, it's fun until the Pirates pick the Cardinals and then they lose to the Cardinals in 2 games.
That's a great point. It really is until somebody overanalyzes what's going to happen.
Somebody's going to do something like that.
Or somebody will go, our team's way better against right-handed pitching. These guys have 4 lefties. We're
going to do that. And then the lefties are going to come out and pitch 16 combined scoreless innings with like 4 hits combined, and it's going to be ridiculous. It's gimmicky.
Let me at least gimmicky. Yeah, let me at least bring it back to a serious note on just the expanded playoff format. What would be interesting to do, and I'll have to, trust me, I've got a little bit of spare time right now. I will probably take a look at like the last 3-4 years in baseball with this expanded playoff format and just see where all these teams might have been around the trade deadline and see how many teams that would have involved, because that's where it would really get interesting, giving yourself like a sample size that's enough to say, okay, this is what we would be looking at. Does that look right? Or are we talking teams that you just don't want to see anywhere near the playoffs? So
we're talking like if there's an expanded playoff like that, it makes the trade deadline interesting for a whole lot of reasons. It makes the regular season interesting for a whole lot of reasons, because what if you have a really tough schedule up front? And like you took it in the can like that first 2-3 months of the season, and you know that it's going to ease up as you continue on.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think a lot differently about that stuff, because maybe in the past you would have considered yourself out of it, and now maybe I can add a player and take advantage of this schedule, and I'm in it.
Yeah. And I mean, to speak on Jim's point too, like you said, to take a sample size, it's 2022. Go back to 2018 even. The Pirates would have been a playoff team under this format. They were the 7 seed at 82 and 79. Okay. They were 82 and 79.
Oh man, now we're talking repercussions like Huntington's still here.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you don't just make the Chris Archer deal. Maybe
that's
you make
really interesting. I mean, and maybe in Pittsburgh that placates people enough. I don't know.
Maybe it interests them a little bit. Yeah, as long as the team is like not in the full depths of teardown.
Yeah,
there's probably a shot, which I think at least makes some people feel a little better. Now, a shot to get your feet wet, at least.
Mm-hmm.
That we'll still have a little bit of an inequity issue there. But I feel like I got to read Yark's comment, because he went out of his way to make sure that I saw how he felt on this subject. It says, Yark, he's third person now, Jim. That's what we did to him with one episode.
Oh, man. He went straight to his head. Yeah.
Literally says, it probably grew so fast that he now looks like James. Hair is just gone. So... says Yark is pro expanded playoffs, but also wants a bunch of other stuff with it. He'd like to drop regular season games. This is his serious point, though. Wants to drop the regular season games to 144 or 154 until there's an expansion.
Well, yeah, because you got to think you're not even going to have Mr. October anymore. It's going to be Mr. November. You're going to have games spill into the middle of November in cold weather cities like Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. I mean, any cold weather city like New York, for example, you're going to be playing games in the snow. You're going to have a snow delay.
I don't disagree with that with Yark at all there. I actually do think that's something that they should consider if they're going to do that. But, James, you and I know as well as anybody that the players get paid in the regular season. So they're not going
Players
to be
get
looking
paid
to
by
lose
the
regular
game.
season games. Right.
By the game.
But regardless, Yark's not wrong. Season's going to get crazy long. So that's probably the last thing we should talk about. Are we okay with the season getting that much longer, and how do they combat that? Do they start earlier? Do you know what do you do? Can't start much earlier than March. That's.
I mean, what immediately came to my head was take down spring training, because we already talked about spring training being too long. Start at the spring training the same time you normally would, and then only have like maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then start in the middle of March, because then you're not dipping into November as much. I think that's like an immediate thing that you could probably do, or keep
the invites down and the split squads away, and just play a couple weeks.
But other than that, I mean, it gets wonky. It gets really wonky, because it's either start early and end early, or cut games. Because
but you couldn't have, for instance, Detroit and Pittsburgh having opening, or in Cincinnati for that matter, having opening day on March 14th.
Yeah,
Colorado.
Very real possibility it's snowing.
Yep.
And that's not great either. So, I mean, it's something to consider, Jim. I mean, you can't have this go into Christmas either.
The Rockies playing in 2 foot of snow, and
yeah, the Rockies.
And let me say this: I don't know if you guys have ever played baseball in cold weather, or even just sat in a game. Okay, so man,
we've all felt the sting.
It is absolutely miserable.
And James has done stuff in the South China Sea. He knows what's up.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is miserable. So I don't know. I don't know how you fit all those games into the schedule. Do you do some more 7-inning doubleheaders along the way to make up for it? I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder, actually, if you don't reduce the games, I wonder if it makes the regular season less important in the first place. So there are some things there that I kind of wish they would address along with this. And to be fair, we don't know any more than what I read to you at the beginning. But
I have a feeling it's going to come up a lot.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. But hey, guys, great talk today. I really enjoyed it. And honestly, I don't begrudge Juan Soto, just in case it came across that way at the beginning. I just wanted to have a conversation about the whole thing. And couldn't pick a better group of guys to do that. It was really good talk today. So, James, people can get a hold of you. How, sir?
Twitter at JLittleton42.
Sorry.
Jim's got me hooked.
By the way.
We got James, man. When this first started, he was like all Facebook, and now he's just the first word out of his mouth is Twitter. I love it.
So, Ethan, how do people get a hold of you besides checking out your show, the Pirates, Locked On Pirates, on the Locked On Network is what I meant to say.
You guys could follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan. Of course, he already plugged Locked On Pirates. It's at Locked On Pirates. Right now, the name is Locked Out Pirates and is staying that way until we are no longer locked out of baseball. For all of my loyal viewers who are here, some of you just saw that, apparently, which tells me you don't look at the Twitter enough. So go do that somewhere.
And Jim, how's everything going for you? Pittsburgh all the time. What's up?
24/7. Yeah, that's me. You can always find me on Twitter at @forthecity_412 or at Jim Stamm 22. And I told you at the beginning this was going to be a good crew. And man, this was great, guys. Good job.
Yeah, good stuff, everybody. Really had a good talk. And yeah, the CBA, I think they're taking a couple steps backward. I expect it to start looking a little bit uglier before it looks good, especially it's going to become very inevitable here in about a week that they're definitely going to have to miss the beginning of the season. Once that happens, a lot of the anger is going to really boil out. So just be looking for some extra passion the next week or so, and we'll be here to talk about it. Until then, Ben, take it away.
Yes, your butt.